So test.salesforce.com will take me to my sandbox, whereas if I go to login.salesforce.com, it will take me to my production environment. Sandbox is a development. Yeah, I'm recorded. I started recording it. So whenever any company was going to Salesforce, they purchased any license with Salesforce, then they will be providing sandboxes. Once they gave sandboxes, then the development will be taking in my sandboxes. Either first development will be done in developer sandbox. Once I finish the development, I'll move the same changes to testing sandbox. So once the testing is qualified, then we'll move that changes everything to my production environment. Sandboxes, there are 4 types of sandboxes. We can use developer, developer pro, partial copy and full copy sandbox. The basic difference between all this is I can only have 200 MB of data here, whereas in developer pro 1 GB, if it is partial copy 5 GB, full copy sandbox, it's equivalent to production environment. Whatever data limit you are having in production, same data we can create, same amount of data we can create in your full copy sandbox. To go to your production environment, we need to use login.salesforce.com. To log into my sandboxes, you need to use test.salesforce.com. Right? So whatever components we created, suppose in your you got a requirement. For that requirement, suppose we got a requirement like we need to create a new object. In that object we created so many fields. So whatever objects and fields we created, those we call it as a components. For a requirement, we need to create multiple components. We need to create multiple components. Once we completed the development for that feature, then we need to deploy it, right? We need to deploy it or move it. Testing. So how we'll be doing it? Anyway, we'll be creating that object, fields, everything in my developer sandbox. So once you created and once you tested, yeah, as per the requirement you completed that. So then how you will be deploying it to testing? So again, do we log into the testing environment again we'll create it manually? Do we need to create it manually? No, there is a deployment process. So Salesforce will provide deployment process. Deployment process. It will be, first one is through Changeups. Changes is a process of moving your changes from one environment to another environment, from one sandbox to another sandbox. So you finished your development work in developer sandbox, right? Then you need to push these changes to testing. So what you will be doing is, there is a concept called change sets. We can create a change sets only in sandboxes. If your company is having any sandboxes, you can move changes from one sandbox to another sandbox. Same thing I told you. Once you finish your development in development sandbox, you will move it to testing sandbox. We can move it through change sets. So change set is nothing but a feature which will be used to move components from one sandbox to another sandbox. So in change sets, there are 2 types of change sets. One is inbound and other is outbound. Inbound and outbound change set. Inbound change set means changes coming into SandBox. And outbound is nothing but changes going to another SandBox. So to move components, we should have two sandboxes linked together. So once I have two sandboxes, what I'll be doing is, once I finish my development in my developer sandbox, I'll be creating an outbound change set. First, let me show you here. Once we create an outbound change set, that will be available as an inbound change set. So if it is a sandbox, you can see here on top of it, the sandbox name will be displayed. This is one my sandbox for called Hybris, and this is another sandbox called Partial. If it is a sandbox, you can see from here also, it will be coming like this. If it is your production environment, nothing will be there. So this is the way to create an inbound change set. So you will be going to your sandbox, and then if you want to create any outbound change set, we will be creating outbound change set. Once I create an outbound change set, so that means these changes will be going to other sandbox, right? Once I've created a change set, once I created an outbound change set, we need to upload it. The next step is we need to upload to any sandbox in my organization. So I need to select. So I'm having three sandboxes, like development is my sandbox. From development I need to push it to, I need to select which sandbox I want to push the changes. Testing 1, testing 2, testing 3. There are 3 testing environments. So first I need to upload it to any one of the sandboxes. Either I need to select testing 1, testing 2 or testing 3. Depending upon that, once we upload it, then this outbound change set what we created here is available as an inbound change set in that sandbox. Whatever outbound change set we created here, when we upload it to any sandbox, then it will be available as an inbound change set in that sandbox. We'll go to the inbound change sets and we'll just deploy it. What we need to do is, first we'll create an outbound change set in developer sandbox. Suppose it's my developer sandbox, dev sandbox. So I finished my work, so then I'm moving these changes. I thought of moving these changes through change set. So to move it, I created outbound change set and I uploaded it to my test 1 sandbox. So then what I need to do is, once I upload it, it is available in a test one sandbox. So there is an option, we need to log into that test one sandbox. We need to log into test one sandbox and then go to inbound change set. Then once we go to inbound change set, here I'll be giving this name for change set name. Suppose it's called RK change set. This is my name. I will upload it to test one sandbox. So I need to log into test one sandbox, then an inbound change sets. This will be available now. On inbound change set, it is available now. So I'll be opening that, and that particular change set I need to deploy it. So then whatever changes we done in dev sandbox, it all will be available in test one sandbox. To move any changes from one sandbox to another sandbox, this is the process. First we need to create an outbound change set in one sandbox, and we need to upload it to any one of the sandbox. It will ask you, when you click on upload, it will ask you on to which sandbox you want to move these changes. Once I select that sandbox, and it is available as an inbound change set. So we need to log into that sandbox and we need to deploy it. Then the changes will be available in your test one sandbox. Once you got any sandbox credentials, then only you can see those change set options. If you are in your production, you cannot see it. See here, you won't get that option. You will be getting only deployment settings and deployment status, but you won't get inbound change set or outbound change set. Let me say deployment status, where it will show. So same thing, if I log into sandbox, this is my sandbox. So if I go here, if I go here, so you can see, right, this is my outbound change set. So here I created this change set. So change set, in change set we can have all components, Apex classes, Visual Force pages, validation rules. See here, we created a validation rule and we moved this validation rule to my production. Multiple components will be there in change set. So once we created this change set, if you click, once we create an outbound change set, everything is finished, then we click on upload. It will ask you where you want to upload this. So these are all the options. Either I can move it to training, staging, KC, dev, 4NT2, hybris, or my production. So I'll be selecting any one of these options. If I want to move it to training or staging, I'll select this. KC, if I want to move it, I will select this. So once I selected it and uploaded it, it will be available. This change set, Sprint 31 change set Echo, will be available as an inbound change set in that particular sandbox. So again, I need to log into that sandbox and deploy it. Are you understanding? So these are the outbound change sets which are moved from this sandbox. In the same way, there are some change sets coming into this sandbox. If you see, it's nothing like sender receiver. We are sending it. There should be some receiver. Receiver is nothing but a sandbox, another sandbox. Two sandboxes should be required. You are sending to someone, right? There should be a receiving sandbox. You can see some changes coming from other to this partial copy sandbox. If you click on it, it will show. So these are all the components in the sandbox. It's still waiting for deployment. If you want to deploy this component, you can deploy it. Or validate means it will validate whether everything will work fine or not. If any error is there, if any component there is a validation rule. In that validation rule, I'm using one field. That field I created newly in my developer sandbox. When moving that component, I forgot to move that field. So now the validation rule won't work. So by mistake we created the change set and we uploaded it. I can validate here whether everything is there or not. If any field or anything I missed or not. If I check with validate, it will just check this change set. What are the changes we are pushing, whether everything is there or not. If any dependency injection is there, it will show me error. It won't deploy this change set. Validating. So before deploying, we can validate also. Here you can see one validation is failed. Why? Because so I created a change set and moved it to this particular sandbox. Here it's showing when trying to validate it, the validation itself is failed. Invalid field name. That means it's not finding this field in this particular flow. So it's giving me error. This field is not available. So then what I have to do is, again I created another change set, added this field in developer sandbox and pushed it here. Then the deployment will be successful. Otherwise it will throw errors. So update warranty case alpha. You can see then I created a next version called update warranty case bravo. So here I added that field. Flow sections, unavailable warehouses. In previous change set it was not there, so that's why I am unable to deploy this change set. So after validation it's successfully deployed. So before deploying, it's better to validate. You will get to know error. Both will do the same things. If any error is there, if you try to deploy also, it won't deploy it. But instead of trying to deploy, it's better to validate first before validate it. And then once the validation is successful, then only you will be using deploy button to deploy those changes. Anything confusing on change sets? Everything, object, field, validation rule, workflow, field update, whatever we learned until now. So we'll be moving all the components through change set. If we want to create data, then data will be created through either a data loader or import wizard. Okay, to move your changes, components, whatever features you created, we have to use change sets. So if I try to create any outbound change set, and I will show you. Instead of here, I'll show in developer sandbox. So now I'm creating an outbound change set. When creating a new outbound change set, it will ask me a name. You can give any description. It's like it's a feature name. I implemented one feature, so I am going to move these changes from one sandbox to another. After this outbound change is created, now I need to start adding components for it. So for that I created a button and I created a field for this particular feature. So all fields will be listed here. So I created a new field on contact, so I am adding it to Changeups. Hello. So, and I created something. So I created one Apex class for this. So I need to push all those changes. I'm having it. So once I created everything, then I need to upload it. Once I click on upload, it will ask me to which environment you want to move these changes, either to training, staging, KZ or partial. These are all organization connected to my production environment. So these are related to only my Balsam brand company. So when Balsam brand has purchased Salesforce, they gave some sandboxes to them. So they can use it for their development and testing purpose. This is my actual production copy. Here entire live users will be there. But whereas these are my sandboxes, this will be used for only for development or testing purposes. So now I can select any one of it and I can move it. I can upload it. Once I upload it, this PBAR1069 alpha will be available as an inbound changer there. So again I have to log into that sandbox and I need to deploy it. This is the way we will be moving our components from one environment to another environment. Okay, any questions? Okay. Then we will go to Apex. What is an Apex? Apex is a Force.com proprietary programming language which will be used in Force.com platform to implement some features. Do you see any limitations until now in administration? Anything we cannot do? Is there any limitation until now? Do you see any limitations in administration? We created one basic app, right? In that basic app, do you want any features you want to implement that is not possible through administration? Whatever point and clicks we have learned until now. Anything missing there? So if anything is not possible through administration, then we need to write our custom, implement that functionality through Apex or Visualforce. So in that, Apex is nothing but a backend programming language. Whenever I if you are clicking on any button. Simple example is, so my client is asking a requirement like this. So once I'm saving this record, what will happen? It will take me to the detail page, right? Once you save any record, either account or contact or opportunity, he is asking, once I save a account, it should take me to saved it. It's taking me to detail page. He don't want this. Once I save a record, he want to see this page, list page. Instead of that page, he want to see this list page. Once I save a new account record, it should navigate me to this list page. Or else, once I create an account, it should ask me to create a new contact. So first I will be creating an account. After this, it should take me to this page, new contact. So these are the things which are not possible through administration, right? With administration, we cannot manage all these things. So then we need to go for Apex. Either we need to create a visual force page or we need to do something. So in that scenarios, we have to go for Apex. To do these kind of changes, we need to write in custom code in Apex. Why? Because this platform will understand only Apex language. Other than that, if you try to write it in .NET or Java, this force.com platform won't understand anything. So already they have built a compilers and everything, so they will use this programming language. Whatever we have writing in Apex, they will convert into, that compiler will be compiling it into platform language, that machine level language, and it will do the functionality, whatever we are asking. So that's why we need to learn Apex. So Apex is similar to Java and .NET. It's similar to Java and .NET. They took some features from Java and some features from .NET and they implemented their own programming language, Apex. So it is also it's an OOPS-based programming language. It's an OOPS-based programming language. So here also everything in real world we can make it as a class. By using a class, we can create an object. What is a class? What do you mean by class?
Class is a collection of objects.
Class is a collection of objects.
Sorry, class is a collection of methods and
Hmm.
objects, I guess.
Why we create a class, actually?
We create a class in order to access its methods.
It's more of like reusability, right? Instead of
Reusability.
reusability, anything we can convert into a class. By creating a class, we can instantiate every time objects, right? The objects
Yeah.
will get the same methods and variables, whatever it's available in a class. All those will be coming to my object. So class is nothing but a blueprint which will be having variables and methods, some functionality. Suppose if I created a math class, in mathematics, like there is a, I want to create a class so that I can have add method, multiply method, divide method, subtract method. So what I'll be doing is I can create a generic class which will be having some variables A, B, C, D, right? Then every time I can create something like I can create an object call. If I want to use those mathematics class, then I'll create Ravi mathematics, something like that. According to my requirement, I can call add method, subtract method, or divide method, right? Depending upon the logic which we have written in that method, it will give me an output. If I call an add method, it may take two or three values a, b, c. So it can add a plus b plus c and give an integer as a output. So method is nothing but it will do some action and at finally it can return any value or it cannot return any value. It all depending upon our declaration. So class is a blueprint which will contain variables and methods. So generally class syntax will be, what will be the class syntax? Class,
Class name equal to
class name,
class name, that's it, I guess.
inside this we can have variables. Variables like integer, I, integer, B, integer, C. These are my variables and it can have methods. Methods might be integer add. So it is returning something. So I'll do something like print a, I'm writing general statements, print B, print C. Then finally I need to return a value. Why? Because this method is expecting an integer. Return I plus B plus C. In the same way I can have another method, integer subtract. Return I minus B minus C. So if I have this class, so I don't need to do calculations every time. So what I'll be doing is whenever I want any subtraction of three numbers, I can just create an object for this. Suppose my class name is math class. So what I'll be doing is every time we can create math class m is equal to new math class and I can assign values to variables like this. M dot I is equal to 1, M dot B is equal to 3, M dot C is equal to 4. So now I can call M dot add. It's returning my integer, so I need to assign it to an integer variable. Result. So what this add method will do, now it will take I as 1, B as 3 and C as 4 and it will add all those values and it will give me a result. In the same way I can call it subtract result is equal to m dot subtract. So now this subtract result will have I minus b minus c, 1 minus 3 minus 4. That value will be there in my subtract result. Result will be having I plus b plus c. So whenever I want to add all these values, instead of me doing this logic, this method, if I pass a, b, c values, this method will give me a value. So all of you are familiar with this, right? How to write a class and methods. What is the general functionality of methods? So just that's it. We require these much concepts like what is a class and what is an object. If we want to extend a class, how to write the syntax, we'll be seeing it. In normal, it's like this, but in Salesforce, class syntax is somewhat, it will be like this. First, there will be an access specifier, whether it can be public, private, global, then class, you need to give with sharing or without sharing, keyword will be there. Abstract or virtual, then your class name, if it is extending any class, we can give that extend class name. If it's implementing, then we can implement any interface. So a class can be a public, private or global. Tomorrow we'll see what is when we need to declare it as a public, when we need to declare it's private or global. And a class can also be an abstract class or a virtual class. And we can also here Anana, it can be with sharing or without sharing. We'll see what is the use case of with sharing and what is the use case of without sharing. A class can extend another class. We'll see why we need to extend another class. Implement interface, we can also, a class can also implement interface. So for example, if you see any class like this, in Apex class syntax will be like this: public, with sharing, class, warehouse, controllers, something will be like this. This is my class. In this class we'll have variables. Normal variables will also be having some access specifier. Either it can be public, private or global. After that, data type. Here data type, we'll see what are all the available data type, and then variable name. So in this way, it has so many variables in the, this is a variable declaration. Methods. So method will also have either can be a public or it can be private or it can be global. If your method is returning any value, it will have return data type. Or it can be a void method. Void means it won't return any value. And your method name. So here your entire logic will be there. Logic comes in your method. Just whereas variables will be used to have hold just data. If you are calculating something a plus b, you need to have some variable to hold that result. So we'll be declaring a c and we'll be using that here. That's it. So entire logic will be there in your methods. Variables it's just for data container. So if you want to store a result, if I want to do any calculations or do something, for that we need variables. My entire logic will be there in my methods. Okay, so from tomorrow onwards we will be seeing the class syntax. If you have a time, just go through what is an interface, how to extend a class, what is virtual class and abstract class. From tomorrow onwards we'll see how to write our classes and we'll start writing our first trigger. We'll go through triggers tomorrow. Okay, any questions? So from tomorrow onwards we'll be start writing our Apex code. First concept is triggers. We'll see why we need triggers. What is a trigger? Any questions?
Is Apex case sensitive?
No, it's case insensitive. It's case insensitive. So if you have Eclipse, please download Eclipse also. Okay, in your systems. We'll see. Let me show you. From Eclipse also we can write our Apex code. This is my Apex class. These all are my Apex classes. So I have a method here. I have a variables here. We'll see. This is my another Apex class. These are all Apex classes. We'll see why we need to write this class. How to write this class. Okay, from tomorrow onwards we'll be learning all this index. What is this list of S object means, what is boolean, what is map, what is list, what is set. Okay then, see you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.